Can you tell us about the early days? Where were you born?
I was born in Bradford, Ohio, a small railroad town about 35 miles from Dayton.
What was it like growing up in a small town?
I thought it was pretty good because everything was in a small location. We could go to the candy store, the bakery, the meat market, the general store, the hardware store within maybe 3 blocks. And the movie was right below us. We lived in an apartment right downtown.
Okay. And you say it was a railroad town?
Right. It was a railroad town back in probably early 1900s. It probably was, probably thought it was going to be one of the largest little cities, railroad towns in the country because of its location. But then they began to make bigger engines, and they were able to bypass Bradford, and they ran from Indianapolis to Columbus, and that made Bradford a graveyard. So they had roundhouses and tracks and lots of trains, and all that pretty much ended.
Did your dad work for the railroad?
He did. My dad did work for the railroad.
Okay. And
sorry, I just want to make sure this is.
Check.
Okay. Everything else is so loud I can't tell if I'm getting good on there.
okay.
Sorry.
And how about your mom?
My mom was an orphan. Her mother died when she was quite young, and she grew up in Xenia at the Soldiers and Sailors Home. Graduated from there and probably was a seamstress. And I'm not sure how she met my dad, but I had an aunt that lived in Bradford, and she probably came there to stay and met my dad. Yeah.
Okay. Did you have any brothers or sisters?
I had 2 brothers and 1 sister, and I'm the youngest one in the family.
Okay. How about, did you have any military service?
I did. The Second War broke out on December 17th, and I was maybe around 18, wasn't quite the draft age. I went to work in NCR and made 50 millimeter shells. And then when I got to be 19, that was the draft age. And if I hadn't joined, I would have been drafted. So I did join the Marine Corps. I did try to get in the Air Force. I wanted to be a pilot before that, but they weren't taking anybody without several years of college, and I didn't have that at the time. And after they lost a lot of pilots, then they began to take younger people, but I was already in the military.
Okay. And what branch of service were you in?
I was in the Marine Corps.
Okay. And when you got sent overseas, where were you stationed?
Well, I started at Guadalcanal in Bougainville, and I was a crewman in a SBD dive bomber. And my responsibility was radar and the radio and the rear gunnery, and I did have a pilot. And we hit numerous islands from strikes, we call them strikes, from Guadalcanal, and then from Bougainville, and all those little islands. That the idea was to destroy the Japanese and gradually work up into Japan.
Okay, and then what did you do after the war?
After the war, I loafed for a couple of months. I had a little money left from, what I was able to save. You can't spend money overseas, so I was able to save money. And then I went back to NCR for about 8 months, and then I went to Ohio State University.
Okay, and when you went to Ohio State University, did you have a career in mind?
Well, when I went to Ohio State, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought maybe a dentist, but I didn't like the idea of working in people's mouths. And my brother knew somebody. I stayed with my brother and his wife. They had an apartment, and he knew somebody from Mexico that grew orchids. They sent a box of orchids out. I didn't know what an orchid was. It was beautiful, but I took those orchids and showed them the different fraternities, and they were ecstatic over them. And it wasn't long until I was selling orchid corsages to numerous fraternities. Every weekend I had orders for maybe 300-400 orchid corsages. And I was able to get people from the college over there to work for me. And after a couple of years, I decided that I liked that business, and I didn't really want to be a dentist. So I was going to transfer into a horticultural school at Ohio State. And one of my employees that was a student said, if you want to be a florist, he says, go to Chicago. He said, because you won't learn that much here. Most of what we learn is growing. So I did go to Chicago, and I think I did very well because I was so enthused about, the flower business. And after I graduated from there, I came to Dayton, worked for several florists, and then I finally got into my own business.
Okay. And you got married at some point along there. Where did that come in?
Well, we got married very young. I believe Jane was 17 and I was almost 19, and that was not unusual during the war. It was a way to pretty much show your love for someone, because you knew you were going to go in the military, and probably most of us thought we wouldn't come back. And that was a commitment we made, but didn't tell anybody. Our folks didn't know. I mean, they would have had a fit if they'd known. And then I went into the military, and of course we did not have the communications you have now. I mean, the only way you could communicate was by letter. And she wrote me every day, I suppose. And then while I was in the service, Jane went into a cadet program. And Sue was born during that time, and she couldn't be a cadet and be married or have a child, so she did have to lie about that. And then I got home after the war, and she hadn't graduated, so we had to wait until after her graduation and the day after we got married in the church.
I see. And then did she go to Columbus with you, or?
No, when I was over at Ohio State, she was in training in Dayton. And we got to see each other on weekends, and occasionally I'd have her come to Columbus, and we'd go to football games. And my brother just had a one-bedroom apartment, and during that time, houses were not plentiful, apartments weren't plentiful. And I had lived in a tent overseas and slept on a fold-up cot, so it was easy for me. I slept in the living room on a fold-up cot, and when Jane would come over, she slept on the couch. That might seem strange now, but it was just so much better than being overseas. And I guess my brother and his wife must have been used to living close with other people because they didn't seem to mind. But I was a moocher on my brother. I took advantage of it. And he probably tell you I didn't, but I think I did, because I didn't pay rent.